Hello, dear learners. We'll continue with what we were studying in the last lesson related to climate films and climate drama. We were discussing the themes in climate films and drama, and we were talking about the exploitation of natural resources. So, we talked about the man-made environmental degradation, which was there in Avatar 2009. This was a very popular film about climate change. The central conflict revolves around the exploitation of the fictional planet Pandora's natural resources by a human mining corporation which threatens to destroy the indigenous people's way of life. And there are drastic consequences to this mining, and the camera has rolled very well. Many techniques related to cinema, many innovative techniques have been used to film the disaster, the cracking up of icebergs, the breaking of the earth, the collapsing of mountains. The canvas is quite vast in this film. So, when we see these films about the exploitation of natural resources, these are kind of disaster films, and the scope of such films is very vast, and the cinematography takes maximum advantage of the landscape, and so it's very creative and very flexible and very innovative, the way the camera focuses on everything. The consequences of exploiting the Earth's resources are in films like The Lorax 212, based on Dr. Seuss's classical environmental tale, and they portray the consequences of unchecked industrialization and the exploitation of natural resources. As you all must be knowing, Dr. Seuss is an important writer. He writes mostly for children, but some of his stories are very famous. They are picture books that he has written. They are books for very small children. But this classic environmental tale, which has been used for this movie, talks about the idea of unchecked industrialization and the exploitation of natural resources. Humanity's hubris and the revenge of nature. In The Happening 2008, directed by Mr. Night Shyamalan, plants release toxins that cause humans to commit mass suicide, seemingly as a form of retaliation against the environmental destruction caused by human activities. So, if we think according to the romantics, or if we think about earth and nature according to the perspective of eco-spirituality, we know that there is a soul in nature, that we are part of nature, and our anger and our brutalities and exploitation of nature only rebound back on us. So, this kind of film, it is based on this philosophical perspective that when you are hurting the environment, you are hurting yourself, and thus the plants are releasing toxins just the way human beings release toxins and have polluted the air, water and land with toxic substances. So, you could consider this as a retaliation of Earth against all the destructive human activities. Then these films also deal with the moral and ethical responsibilities of humans. There are also optimistic narratives showcasing solutions and human resilience in combating climate issues. So, it is but obvious that when we say that human beings are facing the wrath of nature as a consequence of their own actions, there is darkness and there is misery, but there is some optimism also that if they sort of change their attitudes, if they can take a different path, a different way to deal with nature, if they set out to heal nature, if you set out to lead a life in harmony with nature, things can change. So this optimism is also there in some climate films. While many films may focus on the destructive consequences of environmental degradation, there are others that emphasize the potential for hope, resilience, and solutions. These films also highlight the capacity of individuals, communities, and societies to adapt to climate challenges and develop innovative solutions to mitigate the effects of global warming. So it's like creating systems in which one can face the challenges that are coming in because of climate change and not take actions that can worsen the situation. So where there is an issue with water depletion or food shortage, there is much that human beings can do to mend the earth, to heal the earth, to bring a balance so that the crops are restored and so that the water level is maintained and that the water level is balanced and not poisoned. So there are some things that are in the hands of human beings themselves, which if they do, nature is quick to heal and will become normal once more if attitudes change. So some films show this. Rather than presenting climate change as an insurmountable problem, they offer a more optimistic vision of the future where humanity can rise to the occasion and can find ways to coexist with the natural world. So, Arne Naess, the Norwegian environmentalist, philosopher, writer who started the deep ecology movement, he talks about Gandhiji and he mentions these very things that one should live in harmony with nature if one wants the balance to be restored. So films show these things, and he talked about Gandhiji, how in his ashrams nobody was allowed to kill the snakes or the or other poisonous insects like scorpions, and people, because they were not allowed to kill them, they never got bitten because they were so careful. And every night if they got out or got up, they were very careful to check their shoes, and they were not even allowed to keep any medicines because he believed that nature can take care of itself. So the idea is also shown in films that nature can take care of itself, but human beings have to now rectify their vision. They have to rectify themselves. They have to take the right action. Stories about climate activism and change abound, and they are used in films. So documentaries like Before the Flood, 2016, narrated by Leonardo DiCaprio, present the challenges of climate change, but also emphasize the importance of activism and the global movement towards environmental reform. So we know that Leonardo DiCaprio, the actor of a very famous film, The Titanic, everybody knows him around the world. So if such people can take up the environmental cause, it certainly gives it a big push, and his involvement in that documentary is something that would be seen by a lot of people because he is a celebrity. And so there are films like this. They talk about the importance of activism and the global movement towards environmental reform. So they create a movement when celebrities decide to take action like he did. This documentary, it set the path for so many people, for so many young people. So it's important that activism also be outlined and shown in climate films and documentary. And such films, they feature interviews with scientists, politicians and activists, showcasing the efforts being made to combat climate change at both grassroots and government levels. The message is one of hope that through collective action, humanity can address the climate crisis and build a sustainable future. So it is collective action that matters, and many of these films which talk about activism and which talk about change, they talk about collective action. So I can refer to this book by Amitav Ghosh, The Hungry Tide, where he talks about a collective action to give the rights to the people living in the Sundarbans or other coastal areas. So when this thing is shown in films, it is really an imperative to take up action against climate change and towards building a sustainable future. Technological innovation and sustainability. So while some films clearly show technology as the evil behind climate change, man getting obsessed with technological invention and going so far beyond the permissible limits that he destroys himself and he destroys the planet. But there are some films, they focus on the role of technological innovation and sustainability in combating climate change. There have been some celebrities who have talked about this, that technology and computers, they can be used to combat climate change. 2040 is another film made in 2019. A documentary by filmmaker Damon Guillemot explores potential solutions to the climate crisis by imagining what the world could look like in 2040 if we adopted existing technologies to combat global warming. So this is a document about solutions, and it imagines a better world if the existing technologies could be used to combat global warming. So this is something very different from the normal climate change and disaster films. These are films of hope, of positivity and constructive attitude. So I think you should watch this film to get an idea of a different mode of dealing with climate change, other than the warnings of disaster, other than being dystopian. There is something about being positive, that what 2040 would look like if technology was used to combat global warming. So this kind of filmmaking, it emphasizes that the tools and the technology to address climate change already exist, and it is up to humanity to implement them. So it is in the hands of humanity to implement them. So this is a different kind of perspective, and which is worth thinking over. And 2040 is a film that I recommend you see, so you get a good idea of this very different perspective. Human resilience in the face of climate change. Human resilience is something that has been celebrated in literature since a long time, where man has been shown to battle nature, to fight wolves or to fight monsters or to fight elephants or lions, and to come out victorious. But now the coin has changed its face. It is something else. Now man is not trying to defeat nature. Man is trying to survive in the fury of nature, which he has created. So now the need is for human resilience, and the way to adapt, and the way to find ways, to deal with the crisis that is created by human beings themselves. So films like The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, 2019, tell inspiring stories of individuals who have found innovative ways to survive. So these are inspiring stories, and they show the way of how to survive in a world that is threatened by extreme climate events. So based on a true story, the film is about a young Malawian boy who builds a windmill to save his village from famine caused by drought. So in small villages there are many such stories. So this is also one story of a boy saving his village from famine by building a windmill. So this is in the guise of a story. A resolution is being shown. It shows resilience. So climate change, as we said earlier, it can be seen from various perspectives. Films too deal with climate change in different perspectives. Such narratives highlight the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for ingenuity in the face of climate adversity. So we have in India, there are remote locations where there is water scarcity, or where there is flooding, and there may be numerous stories that are picked up by newspapers, and they may be there in news reports, people showing their resilience of one or two people who take up this leadership and try to help their community survive. So such stories are very common, and many news reports are there about them now and then, and films and drama also take up these stories to sort of give an example of resilience, of hope, of resolutions to the impact of climate change. Environmental optimism and hope. The climate crisis is serious. It is not too late to reverse course and create a better future. So it's never too late, and there's still time. If we can act, if we can try to lessen the carbon footprint, if we can plant more trees, if we can preserve more green areas, if we give up on using pesticides and CFCs in our surroundings, if one person does this, and then if it's a whole community or a whole country that does it, it would certainly make a difference. So things like these are shown in such films, which are demonstrating environmental optimism and showing the idea that it's not too late, it's never too late to create a better future. And such films, they appeal to audiences who want to see positive change, and it offers a counter narrative to the often bleak and dystopian portrayals of climate change in popular culture. So climate change as such is something that is dystopian, that is bleak, and that is dark, and they are predictions of the end of the world. So it's rather welcome, films with such themes which talk about optimism and hope. And this optimism and hope, as we have discussed earlier also, is very important in driving action for climate change. So unless one is hopeful of finding a resolution, unless one is hopeful that some improvement can be made so that the future will be better, unless that optimism is there, no action will take place. So there has to be some optimism and hope to drive the environmental action, and that's why such movies are very crucial in the action against climate change. Then we come to another category of films, which are speculative films about life in a post-climate disaster film. So speculative films, and they are there talking about life in a post-climate disaster world where probably everything is destroyed, and this is a dystopian future. So a dominant theme in climate films is the exploration of dystopian futures, where environmental collapse has led to the breakdown of civilization and the struggle for survival in a world ravaged by climate change. So I think we can say that Mad Max films deal with this issue, and they talk about a world that there is a total societal breakdown. There are no traditions, no culture left, no civilization left. It is like people living in a state of savagery, and they are struggling to survive because of lack of essential resources for survival, such as food and water. And so these speculative narratives are often set in post-apocalyptic future, just the way Oryx and Crake starts. Oryx and Crake, this novel by Margaret Atwood, it is a novel which is in flashback. So it starts with this post-apocalyptic future, which is a desert, and the main character, he is sitting in a empty, deserted place where all human beings have been killed. So that's where the story starts, because he goes into flashbacks. How did things come to this point? Because basically he has no food, he has no extra clothing, and all around him, and there are no human beings, but there are creatures that have been created by mixing up genes. So they may be semi-humans, but they are not humans. So this novel, when we read the beginning, it is a good example of this post-dystopian future. And in such novels, there's a warning that of the potential long-term consequences of inaction on climate change. So they give a warning of how the future could turn out if no action is taken to preserve the planet, to preserve the air, soil and water, which are so basic to human existence. And so these are films that give a warning, and they give you the bleak, ugly, torturous landscapes in which humans have barely been able to survive. So science fiction also gives such ideas, where we talked about WALL-E, where the world has been deserted and it is just like a place dumped with garbage, with everybody running away, traveling to other planets. So the earth is sort of just a dump yard. So such are the warnings in these films. Dystopian futures and how they are caused by environmental collapse. I mentioned this film earlier, Snowpiercer. Films like The Snowpiercer 2013 and The Road 2009 envision futures where climate disasters have led to the near total collapse of civilization. So both these films have a very different theme in them, though of course they are dealing with a climate aspect, and they show people as displaced creatures because of climate change. So this happens in Snowpiercer also and the road also. So in the road also, it's in a world that is destroyed and where people are struggling to survive all the depletion and the emptiness and the isolation of a ruined world. In Snowpiercer, a failed attempt to stop global warming through climate engineering leads to a new ice age, and the last remnants of humanity are confined to a train that perpetually circles the globe. So the Snowpiercer refers to this train in which the last survivors of humanity are there, and the whole of the earth is frozen because of an engineering error. They tried to stop global warming, but the mistake led to the creation of a new ice age. So all around them is frozen, and there's only this train and these few survivors, and the film ends on a note of adaptation. It's like humanity has to learn to live with whatever changes have come because of climate change. So the Snowpiercer is a film that needs to be seen for its excellent direction and excellent camera movements, and there is not much scenery other than the snow and what is inside the train, but it talks volumes about dystopian futures caused by human errors, caused by human interference in nature, and the consequences are long lasting. So much so that man needs to adapt to the consequences of his own errors, to the consequences of his meddling with nature, because they cannot undo that climate, they cannot undo that ice age now. So they have to learn to live in it. These dystopian narratives reflect fears about social and economic consequences of climate change, particularly the exacerbation of inequality and the breakdown of societal order. So I already mentioned Mad Max, which shows this dystopian future and how society breaks down. And when society breaks down, when the world is ruined beyond repair, and human beings are struggling for food and water, then it's just a fight to eat or to be eaten, because when there is this kind of chaos and anarchy, then gangs form, and then anarchic rulers come into the picture, and they take control of the resources, and that makes them powerful. So in Mad Max Fury Road, those rulers, those autocratic rulers have taken over the water resources, and they are denying the large surviving population water, which is so basic to existence. So water is like gold, and it's something very precious, and that leads to a fight between the rebels and those rulers. So in Mad Max Fury Road 2015, water and fuel have become the most valuable commodities in a barren post-apocalyptic desert, leading to brutal competition and violence. I did mention that it leads to war and violence and death. So either people die struggling to get food and water, or they die fighting a war against these cruel rulers. So let us stop here. I hope you were able to learn something about the themes in climate films. We'll meet in the next lesson. Thank you.